Hello and welcome to this Monday edition of the World Report with me, Arjun Samar Mahindra. Let's take a look at what's making headlines around the world. Ahead of his inauguration as the 47th President of the United States, Donald Trump vows harsh immigration limits on his first day in office. His presidential inauguration, by the way, represents a preview of his foreign policy approach. As in a break from tradition, several foreign politicians and heads of states are on the guest list. This includes right-wing populist leaders Javier Milei of Argentina and Italy's Giorgia Meloni. Let's listen in to our correspondent from Washington, D.C., Kate Fisher.
The weather may be freezing in Washington, but President-elect Trump is fired up. He said that he's preparing more than 100 executive orders for his first day in office in a show of force that will set the tone for the next 4 years. Many are likely to reflect his pledges to bolster immigration enforcement and improve border security. And in major metropolitan areas, immigration raids could begin almost immediately as he follows through on campaign promises to deport undocumented migrants. And those jailed for their part in the January 6th attack on the US Capitol will be awaiting word of potential pardons from the new president. And world leaders will be watching to see if he begins executing his plans for tariffs, land grabs and ending wars. His inauguration ceremony will begin at 12 p.m. local time, but instead of the traditional ceremony on the steps of the US Capitol, it will take place inside the Capitol building because of these cold temperatures here in Washington. The guests include some of the richest and most powerful people in the world. Every living former president is set to witness Donald Trump's return to power.
Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos were among the star-studded guests at US President-elect Donald Trump's pre-inauguration dinner in Washington on Sunday. Politician Robert F. Kennedy Jr., Trump's son-in-law Jared Kushner and Vice President-elect J.D. Vance were also seen at the private event on the eve of Trump's inauguration. The president-elect appeared on stage with his wife Melania and addressed the audience. Trump said he, and I quote, will not waste a single moment, and said he plans to sign nearly 100 executive orders on the first day, in fact, of his second presidency. Came back online in the US on Sunday, having shut down for just 14 hours as a national ban took effect. The reversal came after Donald Trump said he will delay the embargo with an executive order Monday following his inauguration, which TikTok CEO, in fact, is also attending. Several US lawmakers signaled they would push for the ban to be enforced, however. The Chinese-owned app's long-term future remains unclear in the US. It could be sold to an American owner. Trump floated a US government-backed joint venture, or perhaps the US law will be a blueprint for other countries to pursue their own bans. There's another path. Americans could simply move on, as many have already in fact begun to do so, and the app will join MySpace and Vine in the annals of the social media that was. US President Joe Biden delivered a final farewell from South Carolina on Sunday. Now, it's the same state where an early win in the 2020 election helped catapult Biden to the nation's highest office. Speaking before the congregation of the Royal Missionary Baptist Church, Biden urged Americans to keep the faith in a better day to come and reflected on the influence of both the civil rights movement and the state itself in his political trajectory. Biden also spoke about his life of public service being influenced by his political heroes Martin Luther King Jr. and Robert F. Kennedy, and he also thanked the state for their support. Listen in.
We must hold on to hope. We must stay engaged. We must always keep the faith in a better day to come. I'm not going anywhere. I'm not kidding.
Several immigrant families with their small children went Sunday to the house of an immigration advocate they've known for years in Miami. After having lunch at a large rectangular table, they listened carefully to Nora Sandigo, a a Nicaraguan activist that arrived to the US in 1988 and has since been assisting immigrants. For the group at Santiago's home and for millions here illegally or with temporary legal status, the start of Trump's second term as president on Monday comes with a feeling that their time in the US may end soon. Listen in.
I know so many families are alone. They don't have any relative. They don't know what to do in case that something happened to their children. And it's a way to protect their children from the system. We don't know what will happen eventually, and we need to prevent that situations.
In a disturbing turn of events, barely hours before Trump's inauguration, a man from Hyderabad was shot dead in the United States on Monday in a suspected firing by assailants in the Washington, D.C. area. The victim, who's now been identified as Ravi Teja, was a resident of Hyderabad. He went to the US in March 2022 for a master's degree. After completing his education, the victim was actively looking for a job in the city when the incident took place. The local police are investigating the motive behind the attack and are also working on identifying the perpetrators. A temporary ceasefire to end 15 months of fighting in Gaza began on Sunday, marked by the release of 3 Israeli hostages held by Hamas. The Israeli military also started pulling back from key positions in the region, while some displaced Palestinians began returning home. However, this initial phase of the truce is expected to be tense. As many analysts and senior journalists argue, the situation is fraught with challenges, with 3 far-right Israeli cabinet members resigning, in fact, over the deal, and Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu facing pressure from hardliners to resume the conflict. Meanwhile, terrorist organization Hamas has framed the ceasefire as a victory. Some have even warned that the deep-rooted hatred between Israelis and Palestinians has only intensified, suggesting a complex and uncertain future ahead. Here's Associated Press's John Friedman with some insights.
3 Israeli hostages have come home after over 470 days in captivity. The 3 young women were released as a long-awaited ceasefire between Israel and Hamas took effect. The women came home to a hero's welcome. As they met with relatives at a military base on the Gaza border, thousands of people gathered in a Tel Aviv square, cheering on the release as they watched it live on a large screen. At the same time, Israel was releasing 90 Palestinian prisoners in return. This all came on the first day of the ceasefire. This is a 6-week pause in fighting. It is not an end to the war, but during these 6 weeks, a total of 33 hostages, that's about 1/3 of those in captivity in Gaza, are set to be released. In addition, hundreds of thousands of displaced Palestinians will be allowed to return home in Gaza, and the territory will be flooded with badly needed humanitarian aid. This is not the end of the war, but international mediators are hopeful that it will lay the groundwork for negotiations aimed at ending the war altogether. That would mean a release of all of the roughly 100 hostages being held by Hamas, as well as a full withdrawal of all Israeli troops from Gaza.
Palestinian prisoners released by Israel after 3 hostages left Hamas captivity in an exchange. In fact, said conditions in Israeli prisons were very difficult and chaotic. This after 90 Palestinian prisoners and detainees returned home on Monday to jubilant friends and relatives. The release came more than 7 hours after 3 Israeli hostages released from Hamas's captivity in Gaza returned home. The next release of hostages and prisoners is due Saturday. In just over 2 weeks, talks are to begin on a far more challenging second phase of the ceasefire agreement. Listen in.
اليوم مقومات الحياة في السجن شبه معدومة. اليوم الأسرى والأسرات بيعانوا من حرمان كامل لأبسط الحقوق، من الطعام، من مواد تنظيف، من أشياء حقوقية أساسية. اليوم ملابس لا يمتلكون الأسرى والأسيرات. الوضع في السجن جنوني وعن جد بحاجة لإضاءة عليه وتركيز عليه وعلى ما يعانيه الأسرى.
Meanwhile, the first humanitarian aid trucks entered the Gaza Strip on Sunday as the Israel-Hamas ceasefire took effect. About 600 trucks loaded with humanitarian aid, including fuel supplies, would enter Gaza every day to ease the humanitarian crisis in the enclave. The number of aid trucks will gradually increase from 600 to 800 each day. Of these, 500 trucks, in fact, remain in the southern part of the Gaza Strip, while the remaining 300 will proceed northward towards Gaza City and other areas. Besides, aid supplies to northern Gaza will also continue to beef up once displaced residents begin to return, that is. Palestinians were on the move across Gaza on Monday morning, on the second day of the ceasefire agreement between Hamas and Israel. The skies above Gaza and Israel were silent, in fact, for the first time in over 1 year, and Palestinians began returning to what was left of their homes. They fled across the war-ravaged enclave, started to check on relatives left behind, and in fact, in many cases, to also bury their dead. Fierce fighting continued on multiple fronts on Sunday as Russian forces claimed to have gained control of another settlement in Ukraine's Donetsk, while the Ukrainian side reported it had repelled Russian attacks, according to their latest updates in the conflict. The Russian Ministry of Defense reported that Russian military had in fact taken control of another village in the Donetsk region and had also launched further offensives in multiple directions. Meanwhile, the General Staff of the Ukrainian Armed Forces reported it had engaged in 125 battles on the same day. Over in South Korea, chaos erupted as hundreds of supporters of impeached President Yoon Suk-yeol stormed a court building after his detention was extended, in fact. Protesters overwhelmed riot police, smashed windows, and trashed court offices early Sunday morning. Yoon, who was arrested Wednesday for declaring martial law on the 3rd of December, is accused of insurrection. The acting leader has condemned the violence as unimaginable. Police have arrested 46 people and reported minor injuries while vowing to track down more suspects. President Yoon has called on his supporters to remain peaceful as the country grapples with political turmoil. Over in Colombia, more than 80 people have been killed and 20 others injured in escalating violence involving the National Liberation Army, or the ELN as it's known there, in the country's northeast region. Thousands of residents are fleeing the Catatumbo region, seeking safety in government shelters or hiding, in fact, in nearby mountains. The violence follows the Colombian government's suspension of peace talks with the ELN, accusing the group of war crimes. Fighting has intensified between the ELN, former FARC dissidents, and the Clan del Golfo cartel, with armed groups battling for control of the lucrative cocoa plantations near the Venezuelan border. Defense Minister Ivan Velasquez is in fact set to visit the region as the government prepares to send aid for thousands displaced by the conflict. Meanwhile, President Gustavo Petro's plan for total peace faces mounting challenges among the ongoing unrest. Exhausted Los Angeles firefighters are bracing for the return of yet more dangerously strong gusts as California's governor slammed hurricane-force winds of misinformation surrounding blazes that have killed 27 people. The two largest fires, which have obliterated almost 40,000 acres of land and razed entire neighborhoods of the second biggest U.S. city, were both now more than half contained, officials announced. But the National Weather Service warned that powerful winds and very low humidity would again bring dangerous high and red flag fire weather conditions from Monday, with potential gusts up to 130 kilometers per hour. With less than a month to go before voters choose the next president of Ecuador, all 16 candidates went under the spotlight in the country's first and only mandated television debate on Sunday. The favorite to win the February 9 election is the incumbent Daniel Noboa. He's a young millionaire whose chief rival is the leftist Luisa Gonzalez. The two main opponents were not together in the face-off due to a draw that divided it into two faces. Noboa, in fact, was included in the first round, while Gonzalez was in the second. The candidates took questions on security and crime prevention, state efficiency and public services, and economic growth and employment generation. It's time we step into a short break. I'll see you on the other side. Welcome back. You're watching the World Report on NDTV. Billionaires' wealth grew 3 times faster in 2024 than the year before, while the number of the world's poor has barely changed over the last quarter century. Oxfam International, in its latest assessment of global inequality, time for an annual gathering of elites in Switzerland, also predicts at least 5 trillionaires, yes, 5 trillionaires will crop up over the next decade, 1 year after forecasting that one would appear over that span. The report, titled Takers Not Makers, serves up research that adds weight to a warning by the outgoing US President Joe Biden last week of a dangerous concentration of power in the hands of a very few ultra-wealthy people. 9 out of 10 US firms operating in Europe believe transatlantic economic relations will worsen in the coming years, with the expected policies of incoming US President Donald Trump, such as tariffs, the chief cause. Now, this is according to a survey published on Monday, in fact. The American Chamber of Commerce to the European Union, or AmCham EU, which has more than 160 members, including Apple, Goldman Sachs, Meta, and even Visa, said its survey showed 2/3 expected US policies to harm their operations in Europe in the coming years. Incoming First Lady Melania Trump has launched a cryptocurrency on the eve of her husband's inauguration as the US president. The announcement comes a day after President-elect Donald Trump launched the Trump cryptocurrency. Now, both coins have risen but have seen volatile trade. The official Melania meme is live. You can buy $Melania now, she posted on the social media platform X on Sunday. China has left benchmark lending rates unchanged for a 3rd consecutive month, as expected, in fact, as a weakening yuan has limited Beijing's monetary policy easing efforts. At the monthly fixing on Monday, the 1-year loan prime rate, or the LPR, was kept at 3.1%, while the 5-year LPR was unchanged at 3.6%. Most new and outstanding loans in China, in fact, are based on the 1-year LPR, while the 5-year rate influences the pricing of mortgages. 2-time Olympic medalist and star javelin thrower Neeraj Chopra is now married. Taking to Instagram on Sunday, Chopra shared the news to his fans with a heartfelt note. Starting a new chapter of life with my family, grateful for every blessing that brought us to this moment together. Bound by love, happily ever after. Chopra captioned the post and shared a series of pictures on Instagram, revealing the identity of his life partner. His wife Himani, in fact, is currently studying in the US, as per the athlete's uncle. The pair got married in the presence of close friends and family members in a private, intimate wedding function. US President-elect Donald Trump on Sunday reiterated his stance of preventing transgender athletes from participating in women's sports. He said he will sign an order on this first day to keep men out. Trump made these comments while addressing a rally in Washington 1 day ahead of his swearing-in ceremony, reported news agency Reuters. Time and again, Trump has vowed to ban transgender athletes from participating in women's sports. Undone by a paratha and the digital payments infrastructure, that was how Shariful Islam Shehzad, the man accused of stabbing Indian actor Saif Ali Khan 6 times in a suspected attempted burglary incident, was tracked down and arrested by Mumbai police on Sunday. Sources told NDTV this morning, or rather on Monday morning, that teams of police looking for Shehzad zeroed in on his location after he paid for breakfast, a paratha, via a Google Pay transaction, presumably on his mobile phone. Sources also said he used to work at the restaurant where he received praise for his hard work. The police also reportedly planned to speak to the person who hired Shehzad, a man called Pandey. From there, the accused fled to Dadar and then to Thane. According to reports, rapper Nelly will be performing at President-elect Donald Trump's inaugural ball on Monday, the 20th of January. The 50-year-old Hot in Here rapper joins a lineup of previously announced inauguration performers that includes Carrie Underwood, Kid Rock, Village People, Billy Ray Cyrus, Jason Aldean, Rascal Flatts, Parker McCollum, Lee Greenwood, and Gavin DeGraw. Nelly isn't the only rapper to participate in Trump's inauguration festivities. Earlier this weekend, it was widely reported that Snoop Dogg, Rick Ross, and Soulja Boy performed at the president-elect's Crypto Ball pre-inauguration soiree in Washington, D.C. Well, that's all we have for you today. Take care and have a wonderful day.